When I said that it was like a regime change, I would like to give the facts behind that if you don't mind. Let's start with, we knew early on in 2020 that this virus came from a lab in Wuhan. We know that, we said it, right? Then we also knew that what was happening with the BLM and Antifa riots was riots. It wasn't peaceful, mostly peaceful protests, right? Sure. So we see this track record of being deceived over.
That precedent had been set since probably Ferguson in 2013, I think.
That was when you heard. Well, I mean, what's his name? Rodney King riots. I mean, like this idea is it's been for a long time that and if you look at it, every single election year, presidential election year for the last several decades, there's always a new virus and a new race issue that gets brought up every single presidential election year. So anyway, so they set all that up. Then they have the Hunter Biden laptop suppression. Then you have the Zucker boxes. You have the mail-in ballots, all of this stuff because of COVID. And remember, they were also saying that Trump supporters going to rallies were super spreaders, but these people rioting in the streets were peaceful protesters, okay? So once again, we show the media's bias, okay? Now, when we get to what happened on January 6th, we have to remember that 3 weeks before January 6th, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell changed the law. They made it to where Chief Sund, the Capitol Police Chief, could not invoke the National Guard at will. He had to file paperwork now because they changed the law, okay? So when he files the paperwork asking for the National Guard, Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell say no. Why do they say no? Because bad optics and because there's no need. There's no paperwork that says we need the National Guard there. Now, Yogananda Pittman, who Tariq Johnson actually has blown the whistle on this woman, she's in charge of intelligence in Capitol Police. Okay. She had the intelligence from Mark Milley and the Pentagon that there was going to be over a dozen known terrorists in the crowd. She sat on it. She apparently had information that the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were going to do something. She sat on it. She didn't get it to Chief Sund. Why? Well, because she's friends with Nancy Pelosi. And because that paperwork being in his official file for the request of the National Guard would have got the National Guard there. You see? And then when we factor in the fact that there were confidential human informants for federal agencies, when we factor in the idea that there were federal agents in the crowd, if there's over 1 million people in Washington, D.C. in the streets and there's not federal agents in the crowd, the government's not doing their job. Okay? So coming full circle here, we also have BLM and Antifa not showing up to protest as counter-protesters, but infiltrating the crowd.
I do think that that's probably one of the more notable issues that was fairly obvious. Like you guys had said, BLM and Antifa had been active opposition at every single Trump rally. You couldn't go to a Trump rally without there being, at least some Antifa,
right.
Black bloc wearing the whole
that's why
get up.
And that's why both Oath Keepers and Proud Boys over the entire administration, we've been out there in the streets constantly defending people against them. That's why we were out there. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're there. And J6 too, same thing.
And you guys didn't see any of that.
Now this is really important though, okay? Because this is the conclusion of what I'm getting at. What was the reason for the setup of the riot? Why? Well, because they wanted to stop the debate regarding the certification. They didn't want that information entered into the record. That's number one. And if the riot didn't work, they were going to use the pipe bomber as the excuse. They still have not found that pipe bomber. The Secret Service erased all of their text messages. Okay, that's 1512 right there. That's destruction of that's an obstruction of an official proceeding, destruction of documents or whatever. But anyway, point is that all of these things happen in sequence. The media is there. All of it's all a big setup. By the way, also a Ukrainian spy named Sergei Dubinin was there. I only know that because the FBI told me he was a Ukrainian spy because he asked to take a picture with me. And I had no idea who he was until the FBI told me who he was. So obviously, Ukraine intelligence has a role to play. And then, wait a second, we went to war in Ukraine after Biden got in office. But the point is, it was a setup designed to create a psyop. The psyop was intended to create a demand for Donald Trump to not ever be in office again. Also, to impeach him or even throw him in prison, and to go after his supporters, to paint his supporters as evil insurrectionists, dangerous to democracy, and to have the constituents of the Democrat Party demand that these people not have their constitutional rights obeyed. So we see the layout here of how it is that they saw that, okay, if we're going to do a regime change, we need to go after this group, and we have to figure out a way to demonize them as much as possible so that when we go after them in the media, the country will cheer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get the sense that there's a lot of disagreement with those points on the right. I feel like that's kind of the common sentiment, that the intent of going after Donald Trump was to prevent him from being the president again. The intent of going after you guys and your fellow, the people that were at January 6th, the intent of doing that and kicking in the doors of old ladies and using actual, direct action raids on innocent people was to strike fear in the hearts of conservatives, make them afraid that the government will treat them as if they're terrorists. And that's also what, that was the point of the FBI going after parents for having the wrong politics, because they had the audacity to go and stand up against some of the stuff that you were talking about, Jay, about the LGBT stuff in schools. They had the audacity to go to going to a PTA meeting and saying, I don't want my kids to see this. And so the federal government gets involved. So I think that that's the general consensus. I don't know that I don't think that there's a lot of people that disagree.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.